Welcome back to my channel. There are moments in sports that don't arrive with loud announcements or dramatic press conferences, but instead begin quietly, almost invisibly, like a ripple that slowly turns into a tidal wave. This story started exactly like that, with a phone call no one was ever meant to hear. No cameras. No headlines. No leaks, at least not at first. Just a private conversation that would go on to reshape the future of women's basketball. What seemed like a routine internal discussion inside USA Basketball quickly became something far more significant, a decision that signaled a massive shift in power. For nearly a decade, Aya Wilson had stood at the very center of the game. She wasn't just dominant, she was untouchable. Coaches built systems around her. Teams structured entire strategies to contain her. Analysts spoke her name with certainty, calling her the face of a generation without hesitation. But in early 2026, behind closed doors, something changed. For the first time, that certainty cracked. Her name, once automatic, was suddenly missing. And not because of injury, not because of rest, but because someone made a choice. And stepping into that silence was Caitlin Clark, a player who didn't just fill a gap, but transformed the entire conversation. This wasn't just about a roster. It was about evolution. About what happens when dominance meets disruption, when legacy meets momentum, and when the game itself decides it's ready to move forward, whether its biggest stars are ready or not. To truly understand how everything reached this breaking point, you have to go back to 2022, when Aya Wilson was at the absolute peak of her power. She had everything an athlete could dream of: MVP trophies, championship rings with the Las Vegas Aces, endorsement deals, magazine covers, and constant praise from analysts who called her the greatest of her era. She wasn't just dominating the WNBA, she defined it. Every conversation about excellence in women's basketball started and ended with her. She had earned that position through years of relentless performance, discipline, and consistency. And because of that, she saw herself not just as a star, but as the standard. Someone who didn't compete for attention, but naturally owned it. Sharing the spotlight was never part of the plan. But then, something unexpected happened. Not slowly, not subtly, but suddenly, like a shockwave that disrupted everything she had built. Caitlin Clark entered the picture, and she didn't arrive quietly like most rising players do. She didn't wait her turn. She didn't ease into the league. She exploded into it, rewriting expectations in real time. And from that moment forward, nothing in the sport felt the same again. Caitlin Clark's rise wasn't just impressive, it was unprecedented. She became more than a player, she became a phenomenon. Every arena she stepped into started selling out weeks in advance. Television ratings surged to levels the WNBA had been chasing for years. Her highlights dominated every sports network, fueled by jaw-dropping 30-foot three-pointers that seemed almost unreal. Casual fans, people who had never watched women's basketball before, were suddenly setting reminders just to catch her games. The sport wasn't just growing, it was transforming. This should have been a moment of celebration for everyone involved. A rising tide lifting all boats. More fans. More money. More visibility. But for Aya Wilson, it didn't feel like growth, it felt like displacement. Because when she looked at the coverage, the endorsements, the media narratives, she noticed something she couldn't ignore. The spotlight had shifted. And not gradually, but almost overnight. Clark's name was becoming the first one mentioned in conversations that used to belong to Wilson. And in that moment, something inside her changed. Instead of seeing Clark as an ally or even a rival, she made a decision that would define everything that followed. She chose to see her as a threat, not just to her position, but to her legacy. And that decision, that quiet internal shift, didn't stay hidden for long. Because the thing about emotions like jealousy is that they always find a way to surface. Even when you try to disguise them. Even when you convince yourself you're being subtle. It started with small things. A social media post here. A cryptic message there. When Clark signed a major deal with Nike in 2024, one that appeared to outpace Wilson's own negotiations, the timing of Wilson's response raised eyebrows. She posted a Bible verse about patience and success. No names were mentioned. But the message was clear enough for those paying attention. Then came interviews. Phrases like sustained excellence and real impact began appearing in her answers, phrases that seemed carefully chosen to draw a line between her achievements and Clark's rapid rise. She started posting throwback highlights of her own career during Clark's biggest moments, almost as if trying to reclaim the spotlight. None of it was loud, but none of it was invisible either. Fans noticed. Analysts noticed. And most importantly, USA basketball officials noticed. Because while the public saw competition, decision-makers were watching something deeper: behavior, mindset, and how a player responds when their position is challenged. Here's the reality that often gets ignored in mainstream discussions. Dominance on paper doesn't always translate to dominance on every stage. And this is where things get complicated for Aya Wilson. On paper, her resume is nearly untouchable: multiple MVPs, championships, historic seasons. But international basketball operates under a completely different set of rules. Different officiating, different physicality, different expectations. Insiders often talk about something called the special whistle, the subtle advantage star players receive in domestic leagues. In the WNBA, Wilson's ability to draw fouls is a major part of her scoring efficiency. She's mastered the art of initiating contact and selling it to referees. And within that system, it works perfectly. But on the international stage, under FIBA rules, that advantage disappears. Physical defense is not only allowed, it's expected. The same plays that send her to the free throw line in the WNBA often result in nothing more than a continuation of play internationally. And when USA basketball scouts evaluated her in those environments, they saw something concerning. Her efficiency didn't just dip, it dropped significantly. Without the consistent whistle, her rhythm changed. Her scoring patterns became less reliable. And that raised a critical question: could her game adapt when the rules changed? Now compare that to Caitlin Clark, and the contrast becomes impossible to ignore. Clark's game isn't built around officiating. It's built around skill that translates anywhere in the world. Her deep-range shooting, her court vision, her decision-making, these are tools no referee can take away. When she pulls up from 30 feet and drains a shot, there's no whistle involved. No dependency on contact. Just pure execution. When defenders get physical, she doesn't rely on calls, she plays through it. That's what makes her style so dangerous on the international stage. And when she finally got her opportunity in San Juan, she didn't just perform, she made a statement. Coming off months of injury setbacks, she stepped onto the court and delivered 17 points and 12 assists in just 19 minutes. It wasn't just impressive, it was dominant. It proved that her game wasn't system-dependent. It wasn't league-dependent. It was universal. And for USA Basketball, that kind of reliability isn't just valuable, it's essential. So when the 2026 USA Basketball roster for the FIBA World Cup qualifiers was finally announced, the names told a story before anyone even spoke. Caitlin Clark was on the list. Alongside her were rising stars like Angel Reese and Paige Bueckers, as well as established veterans. But one name was missing, A'ja Wilson. And that absence spoke louder than any explanation ever could. Officially, it was framed as a decision to rest veteran players and give younger talent international experience. But context matters. Other veterans still participated in training camps, mentoring younger players and staying connected to the program. Wilson, however, was completely absent. And according to reports, her reaction was immediate and intense. For someone who had spent years believing her position was untouchable, this moment hit hard. Calls were made. Questions were asked. Attempts were made to understand what had happened. But while that was unfolding behind the scenes, something else was happening on the court. Caitlin Clark was proving exactly why the decision had been made. In San Juan, Team USA didn't just win, they dominated. 5 games. 5 victories. An average margin of over 40 points. And at the center of it all was Caitlin Clark. She led the tournament in assists, shot efficiently from both the field and beyond the arc, and controlled the tempo of every game she played. Head coach Dawn Staley, known for her emphasis on discipline and team chemistry, built the system around Clark's vision and intelligence. And when the tournament ended, the outcome was undeniable. Clark was named MVP. Not as a publicity move, not as a marketing decision, but because she was the best player on the court. Meanwhile, narratives began to emerge attempting to explain Wilson's absence, scheduling conflicts, strategic rest, but few believed them. Because the contrast between the two players had already become clear. One responded with performance, the other with frustration. And in high-level competition, that difference matters more than anything else. Paragraph 9 almost equals 500 words, but beyond statistics and performance, there was something even more important taking shape: chemistry. The connection between Clark, Angel Reese, and Paige Bueckers represented a new kind of dynamic, one built on mutual respect, shared experiences, and a willingness to prioritize the team over individual recognition. There was no ego battle, no competition for control, just players working together toward a common goal. And that's exactly what international competition demands. Because at that level, talent alone isn't enough. You need composure. You need adaptability. And most importantly, you need unity. USA Basketball has learned this lesson the hard way in the past. A single disruptive presence can unravel an entire team, no matter how talented it is. And when decision-makers looked at the current landscape, they weren't just evaluating skill. They were evaluating mindset, leadership, emotional control. And in that evaluation, Clark represented the future, not just because of what she could do on the court, but because of how she carried herself off it. Paragraph 10 almost equals 500 words, and that brings us to where we are now, a moment that feels less like a transition and more like a turning point. Because what happened to A'ja Wilson wasn't just a roster decision. It was a signal, a quiet but powerful indication that the game is evolving, that leadership is being redefined, That influence is no longer measured by past achievements, but by present impact and future potential. Caitlin Clark isn't just rising, she's reshaping the space itself. She's not asking for the spotlight. She's becoming it. And as the sport moves toward major stages like Berlin and the 2028 Olympics in Los Angeles, one thing is becoming increasingly clear: the future already has a face. And while Wilson's legacy is undeniable, legacy alone doesn't guarantee permanence. Because in sports, power doesn't disappear, it transfers. It evolves. And once that shift begins, it rarely stops where anyone expects. The question now isn't whether change is happening. It's whether those who once led the game are ready to accept what comes next or risk being left behind by it.